Raging forest fires in Portugal have killed at least 62 people. Many of the deaths occurred when people fleeing the fires were trapped in their cars. 4 children were among the victims. Officials say more than 50 people were injured, including several firefighters. The wildfires in the central part of the country continue to burn, with hundreds of firefighters engaged on several fronts. Extreme drought and a heat wave contributed to the disaster, the worst in Portugal in decades. The government has declared a 3-day period of mourning.
Just a few miles west of Pulaski, in the township of Angelica, a community found itself smack dead in the heart of a tornado's path on Wednesday afternoon.
My assumption, whatever hit us probably about 3:30.
Roger Ripkowski was on his way home when he realized that his town was in the twister's path.
And I'm thinking to myself, oh boy, please don't let it be our house.
But it was the National Weather Service that confirmed
We're right here just west of Pulaski.
the initial assumption of many here.
These are kind of on the weaker end. I think maybe you have 0, you have 1.
A tornado traveling at about 35 miles per hour touched down for nearly 6 miles, leaving a mess in its path.
And I went to the Bay of Green Bay, Sabisky. Here, where I'm standing right here is probably the worst that I've seen today.
The index now starting right here in New York City, where a Legionnaire's outbreak has turned fatal. 7 cases confirmed in one Manhattan neighborhood. 1 person in their 90s has died. Investigators are focusing on water towers as a possible source of that outbreak.
On Monday, August 21st, it'll get dark during the day. For a few minutes, the moon will orbit perfectly between Earth and the sun and cause a total solar eclipse. It's been 38 years since this last happened in the continental US, and this one will probably create even more of a buzz. Millions of people in 14 states will see the sun blacked out, and that's before we count the millions of others who will travel to see it.
We don't have a precedent for this, so it's hard to predict.
Dr. Angela Speck directs the astronomy department at the University of Missouri. She's been investigating just how popular this once-in-a-lifetime eclipse could be.
12 million people live on the path of totality across the whole country. There are 4 times as many people live within 100 miles. There are 7 times as many people live within 200 miles.
Any other day, most of these spots would be off the beaten path. In August, they'll be the best place for millions of people to see the event. Nearby cities and towns are bracing for huge crowds. Experts will also join the temporary migrations. Eclipses aren't just a spectacle. They're a rare chance to investigate the sun, moon, and our own weather. So if you plan to travel, you might want to hurry. Hotel rooms in Eclipse country are filling up and getting more expensive as August approaches.
For the first time, a U.S. fighter jet has shot down a Syrian warplane. The details are just coming in. The Pentagon says the Syrian plane bombed U.S.-backed forces battling ISIS in the northern part of the country. President Trump has been briefed on the situation. We want to get right to retired Colonel and ABC News contributor Steve Gagnier joining us from Washington. Steve, the Pentagon says this was in self-defense.
Cecilia, for the first time in almost 20 years, a U.S. aircraft has shot down another manned aircraft. This afternoon in the skies over Syria, the U.S. watched as the Syrian jet bombed the U.S.-backed positions. They got on the hotline and the Russians said, stop it. The Syrian jet continued to attack these positions, and shortly thereafter, the Navy pilot was cleared to fire an air-to-air missile and knock down this Su-22.
Very tense situation over there. How much could this escalate the conflict in that region?
Well, we saw President Trump make a very clear statement with the Tomahawk strike. Hopefully, this will set some limits in the skies over Syria.
Russian officials warned that U.S. and coalition warplanes operating west of the Euphrates River, operating over Syrian government-controlled areas, would be tracked as potential targets. The Russians have made such threats before, only to continue using the hotline.
Russia says it might have killed ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The country's defense ministry is investigating reports that Baghdadi was killed in an airstrike in Raqqa, Syria in late May. Baghdadi and other ISIS leaders were reportedly holding a meeting to figure out an escape route from the city. Russian state media says the attack was carried out after drone footage showed the terror group leaders meeting. U.S. officials haven't been able to confirm the reports of Baghdadi's death. Similar reports have circulated before and turned out to be false. Last June, he was killed in an airstrike in Raqqa. And in January, reports surfaced saying Baghdadi had been critically injured in airstrikes in northern Iraq. Baghdadi tends to stay out of the spotlight, appearing only in occasional videos and audio messages. U.S. officials have offered a reward of up to $25 million for information about him.
Straight to a Fox News alert, another deadly attack rocking London overnight.
One person dead, 10 others injured after police say a man filled with rage used that white van to mow down worshipers leaving a mosque.
Wow. The 48-year-old suspect is in custody, now undergoing a psychiatric evaluation. Benjamin Hall is live on the scene in London with new details unfolding at this hour. Benjamin, the sun's up the day after another terror attack.
As you say, have arrested the driver, a 48-year-old white man. He was grappled to the ground by two bystanders until the police arrived.
información oficial de la magnitud de este fuerte sismo que es sensible en este momento y por sobre todas las cosas.
De Guatemala brindando el apoyo, vemos los escombros, prácticamente se convierten estos muros en ripio sobre las cintas.
Porque sabemos que en momentos como estos muchas personas se salen de control, salen corriendo por diversos lugares y es por ello que
In just 8 days, Guatemala has suffered another major earthquake. The latest one happened this morning, a 6.8 in magnitude off the Pacific coast near Port of San Jose. Buildings were reported to be shaking, trees were downed, and this caused powerful tremors in El Salvador. There's some of the latest pictures coming out this morning. That's Antigua, Guatemala, where you can see some of the damage there. Now, as I mentioned, there are no reports of casualties, but this is the second major earthquake in just 8 days. The last one was also off the coast of Guatemala. It was near San Pablo, Guatemala. It happened on June 14th, and this particular earthquake was deadly.
Now to the state of emergency declared tonight in Louisiana. Tropical storm Cindy slamming into the south at this hour. It's now turned deadly. A 10-year-old boy dying because of the storm surge. Strong winds and heavy rain reaching shore, flooding far inland tonight. And look at the scope of the storm. Nearly a foot of rain in some places, with a lot more to come tonight. ABC's Eva Pilgrim is in the storm zone.
That's it right there.
Tonight, the Gulf Coast is under a tornado threat, with Cindy slowly approaching land. The leading edge of the storm filled with funnel clouds. Families on porches watching waterspouts coming ashore in Mississippi. Gusting winds toppling trees in Biloxi and along the Gulf Coast. Even a reported tornado in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. Tragically, a 10-year-old boy killed in Alabama. Storm surge knocking a log onto him. A state of emergency already declared there and in Louisiana. Grand Isle already underwater. Officials urging evacuees to get out early.
We cannot stress enough the importance of avoiding high water, and that's for everyone across the state.
In New Orleans, they're hoping the flood control systems fortified after Katrina will help keep the city dry.
You see this pond? This is water out of Lake Pontchartrain. That levee is all that's keeping this water out of that neighborhood.
More than a half foot of rain already in Mississippi. Hundreds of roads submerged. Officials preparing for more possible rescues tonight.
You're anticipating that you're going to have to get people?
Then we'll have to go in and get some people out of this one. A difficult night ahead, and Eva joins us now from Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. We see the water there, the winds churning. Officials there now going door to door to get families to leave, Eva?
That's right, and they're especially encouraging people in low-lying areas to get out now while they still can. They're closely monitoring the rivers with more than a half foot of rain still expected here. The beach, the bracing to 3 feet of storm surge. It wasn't so much what Jared Kushner said, but that he said it all after 5 months in the administration, making his most high-profile public comments from the White House. This time it was about one of the projects he's most involved in, working to overhaul the government bureaucracy. And today, he leaves for the Middle East, another piece of the portfolio for somebody who's almost always in the room, but rarely center stage.
Often seen, but rarely heard until now.
It's very exciting.
Jared Kushner, one of the most important voices in the president's ear, using that voice at the White House. And that made plenty of noise, even trending on Twitter.
From the private sector.
As Kushner made his most high-profile public appearance yet.
Seriously, what does his voice sound like?
The president's soft-spoken but high-powered son-in-law talking tech with some of the biggest names in the industry.
Many of our federal systems are decades old.
But one of Kushner's roles to reinvent government?
The Department of Defense, for example, still uses 8-inch floppy disks.
May be nothing compared to his next challenge.
If you can't produce peace in the Middle East, nobody can.
This week, we may begin to find out. Kushner, a family friend of the Israeli Prime Minister,
Can I reveal, Jared, how long we've known you?
leaves today for a trip to the Middle East to try to jumpstart high-stakes talks with both the Israelis and Palestinians on peace that has evaded presidents of both parties since before the 36-year-old was born.
I think we're going to make a deal.
A White House official acknowledges any peace agreement would take time, cautioning this is just the first of what will probably be many trips to the region by Kushner and others, working closely with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. Still, skepticism from some.
I don't think it can be solved by sending someone who knows very little about the region and very little about the complexities of modern diplomacy.
Senior White House advisor Jared Kushner touched down in Jerusalem on Wednesday to try to re-engage peace talks between Israel and Palestine. President Donald Trump has called it the, quote, deal of the century, and said if Kushner couldn't produce a peace deal, nobody could. But the timing of Kushner's visit isn't ideal. On Friday, an Israeli border police officer was stabbed to death by a Palestinian attacker. Kushner's first stop was to meet with the grieving family and deliver the president's condolences. Kushner then met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
This is an opportunity to pursue our common goals of security, prosperity, and peace. And Jared, I welcome you here in that spirit. I know of your efforts, President's efforts. I look forward to working with you to achieve these common goals.
Thank you. The president sends his best regards, and it's an honor to be here with you.
Netanyahu tweeted the day before about construction of a new West Bank settlement, the first in 25 years. The U.S. has long considered Jewish settlements on the Palestinian-claimed land a barrier to peace, but the Trump administration has wavered on that precedent. Kushner also visited Ramallah, the de facto capital of the Palestinian National Authority. There he met with President Mahmoud Abbas, who's increasingly unpopular among Palestinians. Abbas wants a two-state solution which would give Palestine its own territory, including the settlement area in the West Bank.
Good evening. It's great to have you with us here on a Tuesday night, and we have several headlines breaking at this hour. First, the terror attack in a busy train station in a major capital. This time, an alleged suicide bomber and explosion, and it happened at the central train station in Brussels. Emergency evacuations followed amid fears. Did this suspect act alone? ABC's chief foreign correspondent Terry Moran with the images coming in right now.
Tonight, the city of Brussels is on edge after shots were fired and explosions rocked the main train station at about 8:30 p.m. Eyewitnesses are sharing images of flames inside the station on social media. Military police took down a suspect immediately after an explosion inside the station. Loud bangs could be heard. The suspect shot as police quickly secured the area packed with locals and tourists on a summer night.
We saw the fear in their eyes. We saw that they were running so fast and that there had to be something that made them run.
Within minutes, the station was locked down, swarmed by heavily armed military troops and police. No reports of any injuries or deaths, but Belgian officials are calling this a terrorist attack.
Russia announcing it launched cruise missiles targeting ISIS positions in Syria. Moscow saying 6 missiles were fired from their vessels in the Mediterranean Sea, claiming the strike destroyed command centers and ammunition stockpiles. Connor Powell live from our Mideast Bureau with the very latest. Connor, do we take the Russians at their word on this one?
Well, it seems to be that there were strikes launched by Russia, and Russia is saying that before they launched these strikes against ISIS, which is their claim, that hasn't been independently verified yet, they gave both Israel and Turkey a heads up about these strikes. They did not, however, give the United States a heads up as they've done in the past. Now, Russia's latest show of force against ISIS comes as mounting tensions between Moscow and Washington after a U.S. jet shot down a Syrian plane that dropped bombs near American-backed rebels in Syria a few days ago. Russia and the Assad regime say that Syrian jet was targeting terrorists, which is sort of a catch-all phrase for anybody that the Assad regime views as an enemy there. Now, in response, Russia's military cut all communications with the Pentagon, and Russia said it would treat any U.S. jets west of the Euphrates as a potential target. The Assad regime really does continue to consolidate both victories and territory on the ground in Syria, and the United States, Russia, and the Assad regime are starting to bump up against each other as they battle not only for space, but against ISIS. And it is becoming much more tense there and raises the real possibility for conflict. But one thing we're starting to see, Leland, is that as we move forward and the Assad regime really is starting to win on the ground, countries like France, French President Macron said yesterday, they see the priority needs to be on ISIS and not Assad leaving. That is very much the view of Russia and Iran. That's a big change from like countries like the United States and Saudi Arabia, which wants Assad gone. A lot of changing dynamics right now on the ground, and in large part, the United States is left out of sort of the future right now because the U.S. and Russia aren't talking.
Down to a major court decision in Mississippi saying businesses and government employees can deny services to LGBT couples because of religious objections. ABC's David Wright is here and the details for us. Good morning, Robin. The Fifth Circuit's decision means that Mississippi could soon begin enforcing the so-called religious objections law, which would allow people in that state to deny services to same-sex couples on religious grounds. The representatives of the LGBT community say they're not giving up. Even though the U.S. Supreme Court says same-sex couples have a constitutionally guaranteed right to get married, Mississippi's law says people who disagree have a right to refuse to serve them. I'm afraid this is going to be yet another excuse to hate find weddings to our fourth, and it throws that all into question. This ruling, reminiscent of Indiana's controversial Religious Freedom Bill, which then Governor Mike Pence signed into law. That law allowed business owners to discriminate based on sexual orientation. The owners of this pizza place in Walkerton, Indiana, refused to cater a gay wedding.
I do not think it is targeting gays. Personally, I don't think it's a discrimination.
Mississippi's law, House Bill 1523, passed at the State House after the Supreme Court issued its ruling on same-sex marriage, but was never allowed to take effect. Supporters of the measure say it protects the beliefs of people who insist marriage is between a man and a woman and who believe a person's gender is determined at birth.
Simply all we're trying to do is say that people of faith have some protection from an overbearing government.
But opponents say the Mississippi law endorses bigotry, pure and simple. Those dangerous tornadoes and floods causing major damage. ABC's Steve Osunsami is on the ground in hard-hit Fairfield, Alabama with more. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning to you, Robin. I'm standing in front of what's left of a state liquor store that took a direct hit. There's the whiskey aisle right there. The J&B and the Dewar's are still standing on their shelves, but look at what happened to the poor bourbon. It was torn apart. All of this is a total loss. This town was caught by surprise by this storm. There were people inside these businesses at the time. This is what's left of an oil service station. As you can see, the walls were torn apart by the high winds. For many, this was a rough night of wild weather across the South.
It just hit here in Fairfield. It was big, guys. It was really big.
A confirmed EF2 tornado came tearing through the small town just outside Birmingham, terrorizing families and destroying their businesses. 4 people were hurt. The only thing left standing here, these 2 shelves.
It lasted about 2 or 3 minutes and it was gone.
Even from a distance, you could see the 120-mile-an-hour winds. People here had to run for cover. The violent winds cut through power lines. This morning, more than 1,000 people here are still without power. What's left of Cindy is not going away quietly across the South. The strong winds plus the high tide added to the heavy rains were more than enough to flood this highway. And just off the coast of Pensacola, this water spout was spinning up less than a mile from shore.
Oh my Lord!
Authorities are still telling some families that they still need to leave their homes for higher ground. More than a foot of rain is soaking parts of Mississippi, leaving people in this neighborhood nearly underwater.
The water is up about 3 or 4 more feet than yesterday.
Even the fire ants are trying to beat the rain. No one here was killed, and authorities say that is a blessing. They're encouraging anyone who doesn't need to be in this area to stay away. Many of the roads are still blocked.